and our responses, particularly in the light of freshwater and carbon. And that's fantastic and essential, of course, but it's very easy to lose sight of a couple of things. One is that people need to be able to farm profitably, they need to be able to farm productively, and they need to be able to fit farm systems to the land and the climate and the people in a way that provides the best outcomes. And that is, and this is where I'm heading, that is a complex jigsaw puzzle. Right? It's not easy to kind of say how do we fit a farm system best to the land and everything else that goes around that. And it's very easy in today's world of sort of 20-second sound bites to look for what's the silver bullet. Oh, we just feed our cattle seaweed and we'll be right, or whatever else it might be. And we know that farm systems are complex, they have feedback loops, it's not that simple. And today we have some people in the room who have some fantastic experience and some learnings from working through farm systems in both a research and a practical way. So we're very excited to hear from those people. I'm going to invite Graham Ogle to come up now, and Graham's going to jump up and down during the day introducing people, and I guess Graham has done a lot of work in recent weeks working with many of you organising today, and on behalf of Rezare Systems we're very grateful for that work as well. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Andrew. Rezare's been planning to run this workshop for quite some time, and it's a real pleasure to have a room full of all the people we want here for this workshop. What I want to do is just cover why we're running the workshop and a little bit about how. I think this is a chance for... Rezare's been looking for the chance to have a bit of a... and I found the word the other day, a policy refresh, a strategy refresh, sorry. Very cool word. And we thought, what better way is there to have a strategy refresh than invite all the right people, and we think you're all the right people, to a venue and talk about what we see as really valuable to farmers. What is value? What is value when we say, of all the things we could provide a farmer, what are the valuable things? I guess I started my career, my idea of that really was forged out of when I started my career in the 1980s, which meant that I had 2 decades of excruciatingly low product prices to work with for farmers. I remember sitting with a farmer one day, he was in trouble, the farm was going to get sold up, and I thought, if we get $35 a lamb, you'd be right. And of course the markets weren't delivering that. Now you can adjust that by whatever you like, whatever inflation index you like. The CPI would mean that farmers today would be getting $55 a lamb, and I imagine our budgeting would be even more difficult today given the increase in costs. Dairy farmers were getting $2.40 a kilo of milk solids. I mean, it's almost unheard of. And if we ramp that up by the CPI, we'd be talking about a payout today of $3.70. So this was the sort of the anvil that forged my early career, and going out to do things for farmers that were of value. The biggest value we could do for farmers then was increase their profitability, and that started to address all the other problems that were on the farm. So when Rezare set out, as we did in 2004, as a group dedicated to agricultural software development, often we sit around and think, is our strategy aligned with where the value is in the industry? Are we aligning our investment in resources where the value resides in the industry? So what we're going to do today is we're going to think, how might we align our investment with what top farmers are saying is important to them? And I can't think of any better way to start this workshop than listening to some top farmers. So that's what we're doing. I think consulting is also an extension of farming, and we'll listen to consultants after that. The farmers that we'll listen to have been through some process of change or intensive planning. And it's from those discussions that we hope you'll pick up some things about what they value. And maybe a successful outcome of this workshop is if you go home and think, hey, maybe we need a strategy refresh as well. Right, we'll now move to the next speaker, who is Gavin McEwen, talking about Farmax. Farmax has a place in my heart, given that I spent the first 10 years managing it during its startup. So I have a lot of sympathy for you, Gavin. Look, Farmax in the sheep and beef industry, quite simply, has been the biggest technology mover that I've seen, and it's really, really pleasing for me to see how you've expanded it since you started managing, and you know, you're getting a much bigger audience and a lot bigger noise about Farmax, but you know there's further to go, and I'd love to hear what that involves.
Thank you, Graham. Can we go up a slide? That one? Yep. Right, again, thanks for that, Graham, and afternoon to everyone. Yeah, pretty big day today, and look, just a shout out to the Rezare team, Graham and Andrew, for putting together this day, because it's been quite enlightening. It's sort of a bit like a TED Talk, where we hear a whole lot of very intelligent people tell us about their products and services and expertise. And I guess, you know, a challenge to Andrew and Graham is, you know, what do we do next? So, you know, give that some thought. But look, I've been very humbled today from the perspective of how often Farmax has been mentioned. Which is great, but as Graham alluded to, we've got a hell of a lot more to do, and I think Farmax is one of the most underutilised pieces of software in the industry. So look, I'm not going to talk too much about the product, but I'm going to give you a bit of history about where we came from. Farmax is probably one of the oldest pieces of agricultural software in New Zealand, along with Cash Manager. You know, its genesis was back in the late 80s, well over 30 years ago. And back then there was a challenge embraced by ag research scientists to, at the Whara Research Station, to create a decision support tool for pastoral farms. And the reason they wanted to do that was to enable a whole lot of science or research to be utilised by farmers in delivering optimal stocking policies. And guys like Dave McCall, Paul Marshall, Kerry Johns, and a number of others did that very successfully in creating Stockpole, which was the which some of you may remember, was the precursor to Farmax. And look, of interest, Farmax remains one of the few examples of a software-based biological modelling tool that's been successfully commercialised. So we've been in business for 18, 19 years now, and yeah, we're a profitable company delivering some real impact to the industry. So to date, there's been about 8,500 farms modelled using Farmax, and that's not only in New Zealand but also in Australia, the UK and South America. So what is our role? I like to try and step back and look at this with a bit of perspective. So we are a tool provider. Now, like other tools, other tools in agriculture are used for leverage. And in Pharmax's case, the leverage that we provide is analysis of a farm system. And New Zealand farmers are generally renowned for their expertise, and we've seen plenty of examples of that this morning. But every single day, farmers are analysing their farm systems in their heads. And they're saying, look, if I pull this lever, what's the likely outcome going to be? That's what I'm sure Munter, sorry for using your nickname, those are the type of things that you're saying every day. But the trouble is that there are now a hell of a lot more variables than there used to be. And it's a fact that once the human mind attempts to analyse a problem with more than 3 variables, there's a 50% chance you'll get the answer wrong. So essentially it's gambling. So that's what computers are for. Computers unemotionally crunch a whole lot of numbers, and Farmax, based on science, it calculates the likely outcomes of a farm system taking into account a whole lot of variables. So Pharmax's role is to provide as sharp a tool as we can for farm businesses to utilise. Look, some of the stories that we hear, that get fed back to us are nothing short of amazing sometimes, and that leads us to a belief that Farmax is like no other piece of agricultural software regarding the level of, or the return on investment it can provide. And just a quick example of that, one of our directors was flying up to a board meeting from Christchurch. He happened to sit next to Mark Harris, who's the marketing manager for the Gallagher Group. Mark's also got a dairy farm on the outskirts of Hamilton. And I did bump into Mark at the field days, so he gave me permission to tell this story. And I'll keep it short, but Mark had a consultancy firm. It was Ag First, as it turns out. He had them come in and do an analysis of his farm business. And using Farmax, they identified a change that could be made to the farm system. And to Mark's credit, he implemented their advice. And as he said to me last week, they went from, they turned the business around from making a loss into making a profit. So this is on the basis of the farm system change. The details you could ask James Allen later. But they ended up making $100,000 extra that season. And that's not just one season, that was every season thereafter. So that was probably 3 or 4 years ago, James. So you guys do the maths on that regarding a return on investment. It's not only Farmax, James has to take some credit as well, of course. But that was a tool Farmax was a tool they utilised. So what's our goal? Our goal is that every pastoral farm in New Zealand should have some access to the benefits Farmax can provide. Now, Farmax is predominantly delivered through consultants who utilise it for the benefit of their clients. And we estimate there's probably 50 or 60% of rural consultants in New Zealand use Farmax. And that number's increasing now that we've put some greenhouse gas calculations in there as well. However, we have a lack of farm system specialists in New Zealand. And there's only a relatively small number of people in the industry that truly understand farm systems. So we say to ourselves, well, what can we do to help, and what are we doing about it? And we've got a number of initiatives. First of all, we have an exceptional help desk that helps our clients use Farmax. We have an accreditation scheme. We provide trainings. We're looking to improve the interface to make it a little bit easier to use. We recognise that is a weakness of Farmax. We enable students to get more people into the industry. We enable students at agricultural tertiary educations to use Farmax. And each year we invest about 50,000 K in giving away free subscriptions to students. And then lastly, we also work with NZIPIM to sponsor the emerging rural professional competition to bring, just to recognise the young people that are doing a great job in the industry. And, will hopefully continue in their careers to become the Bob Thompsons of the future. And I'm probably going to run out of time. No, in fact, I might go over time because it's only Graham next. So.
You don't know what I'm going to say.
But what's next for Farmax? There's a number of things. Farmax is utilised by a number of consultants. It's also utilised by a very, very small percentage of farmers directly who actually have the motivation to use a tool like Farmax. And again, we recognise it's not that easy. What are we doing about that part of the bell curve that we saw earlier today? The majority of farmers who have never heard about Farmax, they don't think it's relevant to them, they perceive it can only be accessed through consultants, or they think it's too expensive. So we're lowering barriers to entry, we're going to make it more accessible through improved user interfaces. Collaboration and integration has been a very big part of our strategy for almost a decade now. And part of that is about, we're not precious about the user interface of Farmax, we are precious about the Pharmax, what we call the Pharmax Engine, and we will enable other pieces of software to use that engine. And Hawkeye is an example of that, Aggregate is an example of that. So we want to share the love in that respect. Lastly, science, very important, and we're lucky our shareholder Ag Research can provide that to us. Because they consider Farmax a conduit for their science to the market where they can create impact in the industry. So I'll just leave you with this thought. How about we let farmers farm? How about we let them do what they're really good at? And as service providers, we need to help them turn complex and hard into simple and easy. And we need to provide technology levers to enable them to make the best possible decisions on farm to secure a future for farming in what is an increasingly complex environment. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.
So I guess, stand in front of the microphone, just a few reflections on the day, and I'll keep this brief. So the first thing I thought about was the messages from our practitioners in the morning sessions. So the people, the farmers and the people who are working closely with farmers. And they talked about, unashamedly stolen from your slides, folks, people, planet, performance, and I've just kind of expanded those out a bit more. We talked about the importance of people, and I think we've reflected on that during the day. There were questions about what's stopping data interoperability, and the answer was people. There were questions about how do we get adoption, and we talked about the need for specialists, and so a lot of it comes back to the importance of people in our thinking. Mathematical equations are great, but people are very important. Planet, we've talked about the need to make sure that we're farming within the constraints that we've got and doing the right things for our land and our planet. Performance, and I've added, and productivity there, and you know, Martin's questions are good ones. We want to include, we know we often fall into talking about improving production, right? And we know we don't want to talk about improving production, we want to talk about improving productivity. The measure of what we're getting out, and the bottom line measure of that is profit, as long as the other factors are equal for the amount of inputs put in and for the amount of emissions going out. Then something that I got out of those farmers who talked this morning is their strong emphasis on planning, on the processes that they and their teams follow, the communication of those processes, and the precision with which they go and measure. They identify what are the important things for them to measure in their systems, and they go and measure them. And together that, you know, that was talked about as systematization, turning things into a system that's repeatable, and I think that's key. So some great learnings for me in those areas today. We talked, for those who are involved in research and in governance, we talked about capabilities, and I guess my reflection thinking about some of the presentations was the amount of amazing capability that we've had leveraged in this sector over many years in our science R&D and all of the things that underpin that. Some fantastic capability, and I think that goes to the heart of what you were talking about before, Graham. Other countries are investing in their core competencies, and in New Zealand we've made a lot of investment, not enough, but a lot of investment in building capability in pastoral agriculture and its underpinnings, which has been fantastic. There's some really valuable collections. We talked about the virtual climate stations, we talked about S-maps, and we've talked about some of the other collections that are out there. I didn't want to just say databases because there's a lot more than just databases. Almost every speaker talked about the opportunity to collaborate further, to engage further, to use data from other sources, whether that's climate stations or soils data or any of the other data sets that are potential to use, and the opportunity to engage together. And we see that in some of the collaborative projects that have been done. We talked a little bit about data integration, and to me there's some real benefits in being able to link data and to have common identifiers and all of those necessary things that make it easier to connect the dots between systems, and also consistency in meaning and interpretation, and are we talking about the same things? And then this afternoon we talked about our, and you know, I'm playing some fun games here, but we talked a little bit about sensing. We started off by talking from space, which is very much built on sensing technologies. But I thought, particularly when I was listening to Dean as well, that's another great example of sourcing data so that farmers aren't having to go and measure it. You know, imagine if you as a farmer, and farmers did have to do this, some still do, go and attend every sale yard that they can so that they know what the prices are. Try and keep their own little book so that they know, you know, where prices are heading. But there are tools that can deliver that data just as space can deliver pasture cover data. And I think we saw through the work that Ravensdown and Balance are doing a bunch of other sensing and use of predictive tools to take some of the effort that farmers would have out of sort of capturing data and making sense of it. A lot of the tools we looked at, including Farmax and including the tools that Ravensdown and Balance have been working on, have been around making predictions that help people make either recommendations or decisions, and that's really powerful. And I think there's been a thread of discussion going through around, well, how do we then extend those services out? If you've got other crops you want to measure with space, how do you do that? Can we extend those services? If you've got some data that's in Farmax or one of these other tools, how do we make it available? How do we make data flow into Farmax? I think my other observation is that we're still at the stage where many of these tools, maybe space being an exception here, require the assistance of somebody, a specialist, to help interpret them, right? Whether that's a rep or an agri manager in a fertiliser company, and we know there's good reasons why we should be doing that, or a consultant to help you with Farmax. And I'm not saying, we know those roles are essential and important, but if we're to move to support for adoption and use, we need to think about how we kind of leverage the time of those people, right? So that they're doing the things that only they can do, and that our tools and our systems are easier to use, so that specialists don't have to get involved at every step in the way. So I guess that's my kind of reflections on what we've talked about today. I hope that, like me, this has been of interest to you, that you've had your eyes opened to some interesting things that people have been doing and some opportunities. I think it's been great to have the input from the farmers and the practitioners to kind of ground truth what the problems are that we're trying to solve. And what we're hoping is that this conversation continues on. So if you're on Zoom or if you're here in the room, hopefully you've made some contacts or you've made some notes of people you should talk to, and we'd really encourage you to continue to do that. If there's any way that Rezare can facilitate those discussions for you, we're happy to do that as well. So thank you very much.